Hello, happy Monday, everybody. Thanks so much for dropping in for this week's episode of Learn with Flo. We are heading full steam ahead into 2024. I've loved, like I said, how so many great conversations, so many new clients already this month. Lots of fun to be had. So if you've been following along with us, we've been kicking off 2024, really talking about some of the up and coming trends that I'm seeing in healthcare, things that we're learning about, things that we're growing about, things that people are kind of demanding as different answers and solutions to their health issues. So we talked about the biggest trends that I see kind of going into 2024, as well as like really embracing this concept of seeking root cause solutions and demanding root cause answers in a world of conventional medicine that is more around palliative care cover-ups. Hello from Georgia. Hi, Lynn. Hello. Hello from Omaha, Nebraska. So with this like demand, as we're seeing in 2024, I'm having such great conversations with individuals that are coming to me, not necessarily finding the answers that they're looking for, either through like diet culture, and I tried eliminating this and I tried eliminating that and I tried taking these supplements, or I, worked with my doctor who ran this test and that test and didn't really find any solutions for me, right? Or kind of gave me more of that cover-up strategy, or kind of accept it, kick the can down the road. Here's a pill for every ill kind of model. And they're like, I just think that there's more, right? So I have seen this and had, like I said, so many conversations with individuals. And I think we're really kicking 2024 off with a bang. And we're diving into some of these like awakenings, I think, as we're starting to flip some of this conventional healthcare on its head, and really having people seeking out answers to reverse their symptoms, find root cause answers, and put some of these things into remission, not just cover them up. And I think one of the biggest topics around this, like no longer here for these palliative care kind of cover-ups journey, is the world of gut health. And I really wanted to dive into this today and really talk about what we're still getting wrong about gut health, because I think that it's one of the most misunderstood journeys for individuals, not just with overt gut issues, but what we'll talk about today is how gut health manifests in so many different areas of our life and so many different areas of our body. And we're out there trying to like spot treat all of these different symptoms, when in reality it might all trace back kind of to the gut, and that's like the last thing that we're treating or even considering in our overall journey, right? So just a few weeks into 2024, right? We're only like 3 going on 4 weeks in, and if this is any indicator to how the rest of the year is going to go, I think gut health is going to be a very, very hot topic. And that's because conventional medicine is routinely failing people in this area that are struggling. Diet culture is definitely failing people in this area that are struggling. And even though gut health is like such a buzzword, it's very, very misunderstood. So let's just zoom out and even just level set for a second. Like, what is even considered gut health, right? When I talk about gut health, a lot of people think immediately like small intestine, large intestine, right? They kind of think about like your daily elimination cycles, like your daily bowel movement patterns. That's what a lot of people think about when they think of gut health, which not wrong, but let's actually back up and take an anatomy lesson, because when we talk about gut health, we're talking about everything like mouth to poop chute, right? Like north to south approach. So when we think gut health, like what's all included in that? Well, number one, your oral cavity, right? Your mouth, which has a microbiome in and of itself, right? So when we see like oral symptoms, maybe someone's dealing with like oral thrush, which is like that white tongue or that white coating, right? When people are dealing with bad breath, like halitosis, people are dealing with gum disease. I'm like, what's going on with your gut health, right? So it starts in the oral microbiome. Or even when people have like cold sores, I have so many different individuals that come in and they're like, I don't know, I never used to struggle with cold sores. It popped up out of nowhere. I'm like, what's going on with the gut health in that picture, right? We also, when we think about gut health, then we kind of travel down the chain, and naturally we think about the stomach, right? The stomach is definitely going to be part of gut health. So if we're seeing symptoms of like ulcers, reflux, heartburn, indigestion, food like sitting like a rock in my stomach. All of those types of things is like, what's going on with gut health? Then we kind of naturally move into other organs, some of the forgotten ones like your liver. Your liver is gut health, right? Those two go hand in hand. I think the liver sometimes kind of gets pushed over here by the wayside, but the liver definitely belongs in the gut health conversation, mostly because as an extension of the liver, we get this very important organ called the gallbladder. Conventional medicine sometimes thinks it's just disposable, like we'll just yank that out, like it's no need. I'm like, no, that is like such a precious organ, like we absolutely need it. It's gonna definitely alter digestive patterns because it stores a very important substance called bile, which helps us digest and absorb fats. If it helps us digest and absorb fats, it also helps us digest and absorb fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, which then balance all of our minerals and our hormones, right? So you see why it's kind of like super important. Like I love talking about the liver, gallbladder, bile because it's a big one, right? So we also think about, when we think about the liver and gut health, we have to think about our detoxification pathways, right? So the process of our body getting rid of toxins, how do you think that happens? Well, we pee, poop, and sweat them out. So of course we're going to think about detox and we're going to think about gut health. And if we have improper detoxification, that can show up in things like skin issues, right? So skin health is also part of that gut health as well too. We also think about individuals that struggle with like different genetic SNPs, like MTHFR, individuals that struggle with high cholesterol, individuals that struggle with fatty liver disease. Like, guys, that's all gut health. Right? Then of course, yes, we're going to get to the obvious, like the small intestine and the large intestine when we think about, bloating or food sensitivities or constipation or diarrhea. Like we have to though just consider, when I talk about gut health, I'm talking about the oral cavity, I'm talking about the stomach, I'm talking about the liver, I'm talking about the small intestine, I'm talking about the large intestine. I didn't even list on there the pancreas, but we could throw the pancreas into gut health as well too, right? So that's what I mean why gut health is such a buzzword, but it's so misunderstood because we tend to just throw shit at like the small or the large intestine. It's like, I'm just going to start a probiotic. I'm going to start taking fiber. I'm going to cut dairy out of my diet. I'm like, that's fine. I was like, but that's not gut health, right? None of that is part of the big gut health picture. Like it's just like one tiny little piece of the puzzle and may or may not even really be a needle mover, right? So if we kind of consider gut health and why gut health is such an influential part of what we're getting wrong about conventional medicine, is because if you really like boil it down to the science, like everything that I just talked about, from the oral cavity to the stomach to the liver to the small intestine, large intestine, everything that I just discussed are sources of uncontrolled inflammation. Let's call a spade a spade. You can put it all into the same bucket. And so we know that there's so many different things in our lifestyle and our health strategies where individuals are like, oh yeah, I just feel like I have a lot of inflammation. And I'm like, okay, well then we need to kind of go inflammation hunting. Let's be a sleuth and start to discover like, where the heck is some of this uncontrolled inflammation coming from, right? And very often it's something along the lines of that overall gut capacity. So when you think about like, oh, okay, so the gut can be sources of uncontrolled inflammation, that's why gut symptoms show up throughout the entire body and all of these different symptoms. So that's when you start to kind of quickly realize you're like, oh, so my gut health is my metabolic health. I'm like, absolutely it is, right? When we talk about metabolic health, we think about blood sugar regulation. We think about our lipids, like our cholesterol panel and triglycerides, right? And insulin resistance. Abso-freaking-lutely. If we're not digesting and absorbing our food well, you will 100% have metabolic health issues, right? You'll have blood sugars that are all over the place. You'll have triglycerides and lipid panels that are all over the place. I'm like, what the heck is going on with your gut health? So gut health is metabolic health. Gut health is also very much mental health too, right? If we have uncontrolled inflammation, some individuals really manifest that as neuroinflammation, right? brain fog, memory issues, headaches, migraines, can't sleep well, right? Anxiety, depression. Like, I think that's a whole nother topic for another day, but I think a big thing that we'll also be starting to see in 2024 is a complete transformation of how we treat mental health conditions as a body up approach versus just a brain down approach. I've done a whole Learn with Flo about that, but all kind of around anxiety. So I think I'll probably have to revisit that conversation as well too. So gut health is metabolic health. Gut health is also your mental health. Gut health is your skin health. Most of the time, like I said, any acne, psoriasis, eczema, things like that are definitely showing up in the skin. Your gut health is also your immune health, right? This is like a big eye opener. And I don't think that there's enough education for individuals that say a female out there that's getting diagnosed with autoimmune disease. Right? They're like, no, I was told I have Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid thing. I'm like, no, I'm completely aware, but it's your immune system going after the thyroid. I'm like, so this isn't treated by treating the thyroid. This is treated by treating your gut, right? So autoimmune disease, all of those are looped into kind of a leaky gut picture. So it's like, we have to recognize that autoimmune patterns are from the gut. We also have to recognize that your gut health is also your hormonal health as well too. All of that being processed through the liver. So this right here is why I think gut health is so misunderstood, especially in conventional medicine, because conventional medicine is literally built on the premise of dividing all of those things up. And sometimes we have to do that. That's why we have different specialists in all of those different areas. Like we have rheumatology, we have dermatology, we have endocrinology, we have gastroenterology, right? We have psychiatric care. It's like we have all of those different subspecialties, but you are one body, and very often like those specialties are there to help like rule out the big stuff, which is great. We absolutely need that. But what if we rule out some of the big stuff like structurally, but we still have issues, right? And this is why really the picture of gut health is so misunderstood, is because it's not always something that we can like see or diagnose, and it's certainly not something that we can just like throw a prescription at or throw an elimination diet at and just like walk away from it, right? So when I think about gut health and what we're still getting wrong with it, there's really kind of like, I boiled it down to 4 main topics for us to kind of talk about today of like what I think we're still getting wrong about gut health, especially from a conventional medicine standpoint or kind of like a diet culture standpoint. And let's be real, there's even some things that like the functional and alternative fields to me are getting wrong about gut health, and what we want to come at kind of with a new approach here heading into a more empowered and educated 2024, right? So the first thing that we're kind of getting wrong about gut health is our conventional testing for gut health is incomplete. And that's why a lot of individuals are struggling as well too. So say somebody is struggling with like overt gut symptoms. That's usually what takes them to a doctor, to a healthcare provider, to even like look at their gut, right? That's where I think, kind of the first mistake is made, is most people don't even think they have gut issues unless they have gut symptoms. I see people all the time that have terrible gut health issues and they have no gut symptoms, but it's showing up somewhere else in their body, whether it's, like I said, brain health, skin health, immune health, metabolic health, right? It might be popping up in different areas. So, but let's just take the classic scenario. Someone's really struggling with overt gut symptoms, bloating, reflux, irregular bowel movements. Most people do the right thing. They head straight to their doctor, who's probably going to like run some blood work, maybe palpate your abdomen. But from there, you might get a referral to a gastroenterologist who might order more testing like a colonoscopy, an endoscopy, to really kind of like rule out the big stuff, right? They're going to rule out like polyps. They're going to rule out cancer. They're going to rule out like celiac disease, like absolutely freaking necessary, right? We're going to get in there. We're going to check things out. Like, what can I see and identify as a source of dysfunction in the gut? Totally great. Very necessary. But what about all of those people where all of those tests come back either inconclusive or they come back perfectly clear and you still have symptoms? Those are the people that I tend to deal with, right? Absolutely. If we have not checked out that there's like nothing, like I said, big, scary going on here, we might need to do that first. But I'm talking about the people that just leave that office and they're like, oh, you just have IBS. Oh, you just have irritable bowel disease. Or, oh, you just have, just start a probiotic, or maybe here, you should probably start a low FODMAP diet. I'm like, that's like a Band-Aid. That's not addressing the root of why they're feeling the way that they feel, right? Not all gut issues can be seen on a scope. And why? Why is that true? Well, because we actually are more bacteria than we are human cells. Can we see bacteria? Nope, not unless we're gonna like culture it on a plate, right? I'm talking about the entirety of our gut microbiome. We are more bacterial cells than we are human cells. So they kind of control us, even though we think we control them, right? So often the dysfunction is something we can't see, but it is very much alive, right? So when I'm doing different gut testing, I'm not looking for like structural differences, right? That's what conventional practitioners are for. I'm looking for like, what is the state of how the digestive system and the microbiome as a whole are operating in that orchestra, right? So we might do things like stool testing to be looking at the gut microbiome. We might be looking for certain like bacterial overgrowths. We might be looking for like insufficiency dysbiosis, like you don't have enough of the good guys, or you don't have enough stomach acid, or you don't have a good bile secretion pattern, or you don't have good pancreatic enzyme function, right? Or you don't have strong immune system activity, right? And they're like, oh, that's why I feel the way I do. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to see that structurally if I put a scope up your butt, right? Same thing with like, we can look for inflammatory dysbiosis. Maybe there's some overgrowths like yeast overgrowths, SIBO overgrowths, right? Maybe there's like some detoxification insufficiencies, right? So even all of your gut testing comes back clear, it doesn't mean that your symptoms aren't valid. Please know that. Through functional testing, we can identify why you're having those symptoms and really kind of help people reverse them for good. So the first thing we're kind of getting wrong about gut health is honestly just our testing. We have testing for the big scary stuff, which is absolutely necessary, but then we get this whole group of people that feel lost when all of that testing comes back inconclusive or clear. Right? It's like, well, my symptoms are still there, so what are we going to do about it, doc? And they might just throw like a stool softener your way or some like crazy elimination diet your way that you're like supposed to follow forever. I don't buy that, right? Second thing that, which kind of leads us into what we're getting wrong about gut health is the symptoms of poor gut health don't always show up in the gut. So I think we're getting this whole group of individuals that kind of get lost in the sauce trying to treat all of these individual symptoms because they're not being told or kind of directed towards looking at their gut. So of course we're gonna, equate some of like the obvious symptoms, like any stomach pain, any bloating, any bowel pattern changes. We're gonna associate that with gut health for sure. But there's so many other ways that this like inflammation shows up in the body that often goes unrecognized, and therefore it gets mistreated or misdiagnosed. Perfect example was the gal I was talking to this morning about Hashimoto's, right? Her thyroid antibodies were through the roof, but she's being like in a conventional medicine model, like she just gets treated the same way, but no one has ever really talked to her about her gut, right? So then it kind of just goes like mistreated in that sense. Other ways that gut health shows up in the body, skin issues for sure, right? So when I see someone with acne, I'm immediately thinking about what's going on in their liver. When someone has psoriasis, that's part of an autoimmune pattern. When someone's got eczema, I'm immediately thinking about dysbiosis. When someone has like dryness, like skin dryness, cracked hands, I'm like, what's going on with your fat soluble vitamins and your fat absorption? right? Other ways that it can show up is like metabolic conditions, right? So we have like high cholesterol, high triglycerides, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. Yes, even the genetic predispositions to these things. What's going on in your gut, right? Weight gain and weight loss resistance. So individuals that really have like a high amount of cravings. Again, I'm starting to wonder, like I said, what's going on in the gut? We know that our good gut bacteria produce things like short chain fatty acids, which then are turned into ketones, which then impact our body's blood sugar regulation and our overall weight management, right? So like gut health is metabolic health. Other ways that it can show up is, like I said, like hypothyroidism. It definitely shows up, our gut health shows up in autoimmune disease. So whether it's like Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, endometriosis, POTS, all of those things are kind of rooted back in this like leaky gut toxin burden pattern, right? It's like, most of the time, individuals that are diagnosed with autoimmune patterns, though, aren't really sent to think about their gut. They're just given like steroids, which are, an anti-inflammatory. Weird, right? It's like, of course we're giving them like high dose anti-inflammatories as part of their routine, because we know that this is rooted in inflammation. We're just not asking the question of where the heck is it coming from and sourcing and fixing that. We're just willing to kind of put in a cover up and kind of a band-aid strategy until more symptoms pop up. Then we'll band-aid those too, right? And the last place this kind of shows up as well is neurological symptoms like anxiety, depression, brain fog, neuropathy, like tingling in hands and feet, as well as like poor memory, right? So all of these things are going to be manifestations of gut issues. So gut issues don't always show up in the gut, which is something, again, I think we're kind of getting wrong about gut health as well too. Which leads us kind of into number 3, like even if and when we manifest and realize like, oh, there's some gut issues going on, a lot of times the treatment for gut issues usually doesn't become all encompassing, let's put it that way. So when we talk about the gut, you can't just like pull the gut out of the body, tinker with it, and then put it back into the same environment and be like, look, it's fixed. It's like, oh no. Like you have to treat the environment around the gut just as much as you're treating the gut itself, because like, how do you think it got that way, right? So this is where, like I said, functional medicine really shines. Some functional medicine practitioners kind of adopt this and get this. Other gut practitioners are just going to tinker around with the gut and they're like, isn't it fixed? And it's like, no, I don't really feel any better. So the treatment for the gut actually has to include outside the gut as well as the gut. And what I mean by this is like the biggest mistake that we're kind of seeing is trying to spot treat the gut unsuccessfully, right? We're not just going to throw supplements at the gut with like probiotics or prebiotics or fibers or greens. And we're not just going to throw like antibiotics at the gut, like or prescriptions at the gut, like antibiotics or like steroids or stool softeners or PPIs or Miralax, right? It's like we just throw all of these things, or we're going to just throw an elimination diet at the gut, like go gluten-free. Here's FODMAP, here's dairy-free, here's an AIP protocol, right? It's like we have to consider that what impacts the gut around it and treat that at least alongside actually treating the gut. So you're not going to really make long-term impacts and improvements unless you understand like the role of the nervous system, right? Parasympathetic versus sympathetic, rest and digest versus fight or flight, that whole gut-brain connection. You're not going to make a whole lot of progress if we're not also taking that into consideration, right? So we're going to be talking things like nervous system regulation, stress management, drainage and detox practices, blood sugar, trauma, right? It's like, oh, we're going to be talking about blood sugar, but I thought that I had gut issues. No, I'm fully aware that you have gut issues, and blood sugar is going to be a very big part of correcting that. And so if we don't talk about that first, then we're not going to get very far, right? So the body doesn't make mistakes, right? I always heard that and I live and die by that. The body doesn't make mistakes. It does everything for a reason. So there's a reason why the gut dysfunction exists. And to prevent it from happening again, we have to consider the root cause around it as well too, which I think like the whole concept of understanding that even we're getting kind of the treatment patterns of gut health wrong lead us into kind of number 4, which is along the same lines, but I really, really see this in a functional medicine space too, is especially when we are treating the gut itself, not only are we missing treating around the gut, even when we do treat the gut, some individuals are kind of getting that a little bit wrong too, because they want to come in like super heavy handed with all these really sexy like kill protocols, right? It's like, ooh, I found some SIBO, I'm just going to come in and kill it. Or like, ooh, we found some candida, I'm just going to come in and kill it off. And it's like, even functional medicine is really bad about that sometimes. And they'll come in with like herbal antimicrobials and all of this stuff. And I'm like, that's all well and good, but like, why? Like, why do we have candida overgrowth? The body should have stop gates against that. Why do we have SIBO overgrowth, right? It's like, we can take care of these overgrowths, but like, why are like, don't get duped into spending like all of this hard-earned time and money and effort thinking that it's just about some kill protocol and then I'm just going to go on my way, right? It's the same thing of thinking like, oh, I can just take some antibiotics and it just all goes away. I'm like, but then all your symptoms came back in about 3 months, didn't they? And it's like, yeah, they did, right? And that's because we're not addressing the gut as a whole. So we have to make sure that oftentimes the gut doesn't necessarily need more. It's not about like more supplements and more restriction. The gut honestly usually needs a little bit like more connection back to nature. Like, what about nutritional diversity? What about sunlight and circadian rhythms? What about rest and digest and things like HRV and all of those types of patterns, right? So that's why I think the role of gut health, we're getting like kind of lost in the weeds a little bit, not only from a conventional medicine standpoint, but also even like functional and alternative practitioners can kind of get a little bit lost because it's not just a one-size-fits-all kind of protocol. You can't just Band-Aid solution it. It's like, oh, okay, let me kind of consider this within the greater landscape of things. So when I think about, like I said, heading into 2024, all these trends and all these cool things that we're going to start to see, I want you guys to feel really educated and empowered to be able to walk that world of all of those types of things differently. And you're like, oh, okay, I see that Instagram ad for that greens powder. And I'm like, it says it does all these magic things for my gut health, but in what context, right? It's like, it's probably not going to be a fix-all. It probably isn't even going to really do wonders unless you answer the question of like, well, why? What's that bigger picture? So when we're thinking about gut health and we're kind of wanting to do things differently, we want to think about, number one, how we're testing a little bit differently. Conventional testing is going to rule out the big stuff, but more of that microbiome and immune system and digestive capacity, that might give you more answers. We also want to think about making sure that we're recognizing symptoms that aren't just gut health, right? So it's like when I think of my immune health, or I think of skin health, or neurological symptoms, or metabolic syndrome, those types of things are gut health too. And then when I'm thinking about treatment strategies, I want to make sure that I'm working with a practitioner that understands like, yes, what are we going to do within the gut terrain itself, but also what are we going to do surrounding the gut to ensure that we're truly changing the gut terrain as a whole. Those are all of the things that I do in my one-on-one private practice with individuals. If you're interested in any of, like I said, working through some of that, you have some of those same gut issues, or you haven't been able to find somebody that's really putting all those pieces of the puzzle together for you, don't hesitate to go to my Instagram page. You can click the link right there in my bio. Right at the top, there's a link to apply to work with me one-on-one. Fill that out, come straight to me, and I'll reach out to kind of get us started on that track as well too. So gut health, I think, will be a big buzzword of 2024, but I'm hopeful that you guys, after listening to this, will feel more empowered on how to tackle that with a keener eye. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday, and I'll be excited to join you guys next week for more Learn with Flo.